Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Daily AI Show live. It is 10 a.m. on the East Coast. It is 7 p.m. or 7 a.m., excuse me, on the Pacific. So thank you for being live. We're here 5 days a week. If this is the first time you've ever happened upon our show, thanks for being here. What we're going to do today is we're going to start off as we normally do by talking about some of the bigger news stories that are out there. There's some interesting ones today that we want to get to. And then we have like two other segments that we want to get into. One of them is going to be about sort of the era of experience, of human experience, of synthetic data. There's been some really interesting papers put out, not necessarily like in the last week, but the last couple of months from folks over at Google DeepMind or people who are initially involved with AlphaGo. You might have even heard of AlphaZero. You might have even heard of Move 37. We'll explain what that is if that doesn't mean anything to you right now. And we're just going to talk about this concept of human experience, reinforcement learning, which we actually talked about yesterday with Andrew Karpathy's recent podcast he had out and how he kind of called it trash or whatever the word was he used. You can go back to yesterday's show and hear more about that. And then we'll have another segment after that, which I think, Beth, did you throw this one in there, the AI spectrum of use in work? No. Okay. So we may actually pivot off of that. And we since Beth and I are both here, we might actually talk more about Claude Code or not code. I'm sorry, Claude skills. Because Andy, you did some deep research. I built some stuff that's similar but different as far as what a custom GPT could do. And I know, Beth, you had some more thoughts on that from yesterday's show too. So I think that's what we'll do for segment 2. I'm not quite sure how that segment got in there for today's show, but that's okay. All right, let's go ahead and kick off with our news of the day. And I do have one that I kind of want to start off with if you guys are cool with it. It's a fast one, but you guys remember this friend pendant, this friend AI? Do you remember that in the news from not too long ago? Okay, so this came up in my feed from yesterday, right? October 20th. People tore apart a cutout of the device while chanting "Get real, friends." Okay, so first I thought this was just an article really quick about people have been marking up the billboards around subways in New York about this friend pendant and saying, FAI, and having some strong feelings about it with some Sharpie markers and stuff. But that's actually not what's the craziest part about this story. So this has been happening. And I guess the founder, now they're trying to decide whether this was something that was, this just happened and everybody just sort of naturally found their way, or this was some sort of marketing ploy. And I'm not quite sure either. But based on what they said was this guy reaches out and says, the CEO here, I guess is Schiffman, reaches out and said, "Hey, I hear you guys have a problem with this. Let's settle this once and for all." Gives a time and a place for people to meet in New York. And people did. They showed up. And he says he took a red eye to show up that this was completely organic. It was not something that was, something they necessarily were, a marketing blitz or something like that. He takes the red eye and basically has good, serious, as he quotes them, conversations that all ended with good conversations and people shaking hands and, having general good discourse. So on top of the fact that it's like an interesting conversation about, this friend AI is it's a replacement. It's supposed to be listening to your conversations and, it's not real human connections or whatever. But like I said, I think the bigger story here for me was just this idea that the CEO puts out a meet me here time and place, which is just interesting. And then people did. And then he showed up, which I guess you kind of, if you put that out there, you would expect he would show up and then had these interesting conversations about it. It kind of gives me hope, I guess, that people can have good, solid disagreements and conversations in person. And also the irony is obviously not lost on the idea of this friend AI technology, which on its face seems to eliminate person-to-person conversations. Yet that's what they had to talk about the AI. So I found this story fascinating on all angles and levels. I don't know if you guys saw it or whatever, but it's interesting.
Yeah, no. Well, it's an interesting angle. Yeah. And it, this pendant, the friend pendant, is like the limitless pendant, which Beth, I think you and I both ordered. Maybe you didn't. I ordered it. But I've been ghosted by Limitless. I've never heard anything from them. I haven't got my pendant. I thought I was going to get it within a month or so. So anyway.
That's interesting because I know people who use the Limitless pendant and live by it. and they're
That's
they're in sessions with me. They're part of Rob Lennon's network, and there was a time where Rob was like, "Oh wait, what did I just say?" Right?
Mhm.
And he's like, "Give me a second," right? And then could go back in that conversation, and it saved so many things about like, oh, what is it? I think it's interesting that the friend pendant is marketed differently, because the limitless pendant isn't like, you'll always have a companion. The limitless
Right.
pendant is like everything that's ever said in your vicinity, you will have an opportunity to go back to. You don't need to remember, and you don't need to remember because it's all recorded. I think that's really interesting.
And look, this is probably a better topic for like beyond the news, because it just fascinates me. But this idea of if everybody's not everybody, if people are walking around with it recording everything, the limitless, or maybe what Friend also would do. But I agree with you. Friend seems to be a slightly different angle towards the same thing, right? I had a post, I mean, probably 3 years ago now, that was like everybody should act like the Rock. And my point in the Facebook or the LinkedIn post I did, it was a long time ago, I did it as a video, was saying that if you're famous like the Rock, Dwayne Johnson, or pick any celebrity that you want to, sports or otherwise, and at that level, he doesn't really have the freedom to have a bad day in public, right? He knows that he's now been conditioned after many years of his celebrity, and being famous around the world, not just in a particular area of like this country, where he's famous, he's big, he's imposing, people are going to know who he is. It's hard to hide as him, and so he can have a bad day, and I'm sure he does have bad days, but I'm sure a lot of it also is done through a smiling through your teeth, right? It's as you're looking at somebody, because he knows there's such an easy way for everything he does to be swapped up. People are going to have their phones out. He is actually having that limitless recording in so many different ways, as are many other people. And they're adjusting to that in the best way they can. But I do wonder how it affects everybody else, because I think what would normally happen to me, I can definitely put me in this thing. I'm not going to love all my interactions. And so I think, sure, go with something like the limitless, but then I also think careful what you wish for, because it might expose lots of things that you don't remember and you've selectively pushed out and said, oh, that conversation didn't go that way, only to find that you rewind the conversation and find out that you were gaslighting somebody. You don't remember it that way, but that's what you were doing, and people can go, no, look, I mean, it's right there. You were just in a mood or whatever, anyway. Not outside the news of the story, but I would love to talk about this on the show more, because I think it's a careful what you wish for. There's a lot of maybe benefits to it, and there's a lot of probably self-reflection that comes along with oof, am I actually the good human I think I am? Right?
Deep thoughts for Tuesday.
Deep thoughts to start up the show. Okay, let's move away from that. Let's get into some other news. Oh yeah, go ahead. But then let's go into other news. Go into your news story after that.
I'm going to go into the next news story because I want to weave off that, which is the statement that OpenAI came out with in connection with SAG and other things, that they're going to they'll strengthen guardrails on Sora 2 over replication of celebrity likenesses and voices. And right, up until now, you could fake that Dwayne Johnson interaction if you wanted, right? This feels so disingenuous to me, because like that was the point, right? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but this kind of looks like, ooh, our bad. Did you not want this? And it's like
100%. Agree. Yeah.
Of course you did this on purpose. Of course you did the whole thing. And yeah, it's just there's a part of me that feels like what's happening with AI is like a game of tag, right? I'm going to run until you can catch me. And then, oh, right, okay, we're playing a game, except it's not a game. Like there's Paul Reiser came out at one point and was like, so did I miss the day that copyright like went away? Do we not have copyright anymore? What's happening? So this is a real story. They really came out and said this. And it feels like the it's just surface and it's missing the actual conversation.
Well, I saw this from the Bryan Cranston post on that. I don't know. I may have missed it when you might have said his name at the beginning there. But, this, Beth, is like right back to what we were talking about. I agree 100%. First of all, I 100% agree with you. This is a oopsie, this was premeditated. As far as I'm concerned, it was. And I even think OpenAI kind of showed their hand here when they originally said, we're just building the platform. It's up to you, the creator, and the person who owns the rights to decide between yourself, because that's easy. I can get in touch with Bryan Cranston's family, or let's use somebody who's passed away, Elvis, right? Or the real life one, Robin Williams. His daughter Zelda came out and said, please stop. This is negatively affecting my life. Please stop. I think you think you're helping by saying, oh, look at this lovely photo. And it was not okay with her. And I applaud her for coming out and saying, this is not okay for me. So then they sort of rolled back and said like, oh, well, maybe we should have never, and now it's all the SAG stuff and that you're talking about, Beth. But I'm with you. Like, that this is not the right way to do this. But you know what it also did, and I'm sure it was a calculated move, was it shot Sora to the top of the app charts. It drove probably buku new signups or whatever for ChatGPT as an alter, as a branch off of that. And all we hear is like, oh my God, Sora 2 uses so much data. They had to just sign another megawatt, deal for energy because they literally can't keep up. And I go, yeah, this is all the play of OpenAI. And now they're getting to roll back. And Bryan Cranston's in here going, I'm glad we could come to an agreement. But if I were Bryan Cranston, I'd be like, why? Why did I have to come to an agreement? Like, why wasn't this already a thing?
And the process in the beginning, that was announced, right, when Sora came out, was you can opt out, right? Like you can contact us and we'll or whatever, turn the lever on. Like you can't do this. That's not how copyright works.
Yeah, scroll down to
Elvis. Copyright
is
a permission, and then you can. Not like, hey, come and talk to us so that we know we can't.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. It doesn't sit easy with me. I'll tell you that. It doesn't, as much as Sora was fun and, like you could see, watch, whatever, every time I would see it, the ones that bothered me the most were the MLK ones. And not that there wasn't other ones that people had problems with too, but I didn't like the idea that these were I have a dream speeches and people were purposely, maliciously or funny or satiric. I don't know what the purpose was or the intent of the person, but I personally had a problem watching what essentially was, a great figure in human history, in American history, but world history. And the intent of the mix-up for the Sora was that he was tripping over his words as if he had a speech impediment or something during I Have a Dream. And I thought, God, that's tricky, man. I don't love that. And there's about 1,000 other ways that did not sit well with me. And so, and it was his voice and his likeness. It was clearly not like a parody. It wasn't even a cartoon. It was meant to look exactly like him. And that's the problem I have with it.
So, and we should move on to other news stories. But the piece that I always come back to for this, and I come back to it for us as well. I understand why this isn't the thing, but I don't think any of us would have as much of a problem if it was like the celebrity lookalike, right? There's enough there. The voice is off, it's a different nose, there's a thing. Like we've had, this is a generational thing, Greg is saying, this is a generational thing. We've had the concept of celebrity lookalikes for a really long time. It is how celebrity, if you couldn't afford the actual celebrity, sometimes you got the lookalike to come and do that. That feels to me like an existing tool. But that's what it's now too good, right? It's not the lookalike, it's the actual deepfake of the celebrity. And I keep sort of coming back to like, why are we not having this piece? Why is that not the model? At least it's a more familiar one. But
the last thing I'll say on this, to your point, Beth, is if I was watching SNL this past weekend, right? Sabrina Carpenter was the host and singer as well. Had they had a digital short in the middle of it that used this level of deepfake technology satirically, like in comedy, I would still have a problem with it. I'd be like, ooh, you're now obscuring that this is, like, to your point, an impersonator, somebody in SNL doing a great impersonation. You know, I know Dana Carvey isn't George Bush. Yes, that's aging me, but you know what I mean, right? And so I think that's the difference to me. Had they done this and name any past figures or current figures, and SNL had taken that leap and said, like, look how crazy real this looks, but it's all in jest, I'd be like, ooh, that's a bridge too far for me. So anyway, I think there's more here. Andy, why don't you jump over with some other news here, and then we may round up the news after that.
Yeah. After all of that concern, let me just add another pile of dump on this thing.
We're all about doom and gloom today.
This is just released today. Reporting from the New York Times. I read it in The Verge, and it is about Amazon and their plans leaked. And so there's leaked documents that got to the New York Times that say that Amazon's robotics team is working towards automating 75% of the company's entire operations. Jeez. And expects this to impact 600,000 jobs that were otherwise on their plans out through 2033, which is a long time. That's 8 years away. But there's 600,000 jobs that might have been available that aren't going to be available if Amazon's plans are fully infecting us, right? Or affected or infecting us. So the reporting cites internal strategy documents and interviews, and says that at the same time as it's planning to remove 600,000 from its forward-looking plans for hiring humans, it expects to sell about twice as much to the humans that now no longer have jobs. So there's just something wrong about the calculus here. And it points out the serious disruption of the overall economy when, the loss of Main Street retail, which is a thing that I grew up with, right? Main Street, there were stores in your local community. Well, those got substantially degraded and then eventually eliminated in many rural communities because of the advent of Amazon's next day delivery, basically of almost anything you would want to buy from anywhere in the world. And now, so instead of being able to work in a local retail store, you would work at the distribution center for Amazon or as an Amazon driver. Well, forget that. What's going to happen to the humans here is the big question. Here's a quote from someone who was interviewed by the New York Times, and his name is Darren Acemoglu, the winner of the Nobel Prize in Economic Science last year. He said, if Amazon achieves its automation goal, one of the biggest employers in the United States will become a net job destroyer, not a net job creator. Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Sorry, Karl was out and Karl was back, and it changed the things on there. That is really interesting, Andy, on that one. I agree with you. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I do. You said it yesterday. You're sort of an AI optimist. I am too. AI will create a lot of new jobs, and I hope that we've seen through history that it'll be net new. But it is pretty hard to wrap your head around and go, well, if those 600,000 jobs do disappear or don't arrive, I guess is what you're kind of saying, is like they're not going to show up in the next 8 years.
Yeah.
I just think of all the people, I mean, around the holiday season here in the next month or so, all your seasonal people who would normally be able to come in and work seasonal work, it's going to affect them too.
Yeah. No. By the way, in the near term, like forget about out 8 years, just between 2025, this year, and 2027, the documents suggest that they will ditch 160,000 jobs that either currently exist or are planned to be added in that period of time.
But they have been treating their workers like robots kind of the whole time, right? There was all those stories about like the Amazon delivery people with the urine bottle in the truck so that you didn't have to, right? So like this is this is bad. I'm not saying this is good, but this is not necessarily unexpected, because it did seem like if you're going to be able to get a better robot than the human version of the robot, that's where they're going to go, right? Robots don't hurt their backs, and if they do, they swap them out for another part, right? Like robots can lift, robots don't pee, robots don't need insurance in that same kind of way in terms of health insurance. Yeah, I feel like that's a harbinger of where we're going.
I know, Karl, you're here. I'm gonna share one more news story, and I think we'll move on to the next segment if everybody's okay with this. But I just thought this would be, because we've sort of been doom and gloom. So let's turn the attention to crap. Said in the politest way. Kohler's new toilet camera provides health insights based on your bathroom breaks. It's using algorithms and AI basically to look down, not up, look down at the toilet, and help with things like blood in your stool, I suppose, and other things like that. And this is maybe in the era of, wait, who asked for this? But like, I get it. I get that this is valuable to a lot of people. My wife is a dietitian, but she knows a lot about the things that can be found from stool samples, and this is a big part of health. And there's a lot of good reasons. I mean, you have the places like Cologuard that are able to send it to your house, and you can send out samples. And yes, everybody thinks, I don't really want to talk about that or whatever. But the reality is there's a lot of science behind this. So I get it, but it's for pre-order now for $5.99, with shipping expected to start today, I guess. The collected health data is made available through the mobile Kohler Health app. That scares me, which is currently available on iOS and coming soon. Do I want Kohler making my health app, or should they have just partnered with a legit health app? Kohler Health membership, that's going to cost you $7 a month or $70 a year, or $13 a month or $130 a year for the family plan. So there you go. It looks down. Now, the first thing I thought about was
bye, Brian.
I have questions. I meant to stop sharing. Sorry, is what I was trying to do there. I have questions because toilet water is water and it's reflective, and I think a lot of people would have concerns. I mean, if you could ensure that camera is only picking up the right data, I think there's a lot of people that are going to be concerned about.
There's a big opportunity here. I bet your underside is as individual in your household as a fingerprint, and it'll be able to identify you.
Now, we should be clear. It only points down. It doesn't point up, but it's still. I don't think this is going to be a big seller. I'll just put it out and take a shot and say I don't think this is going to be a big seller, but maybe I'm wrong. What do you guys think?
Why is there no information about the security that goes from the unit to the cloud? Like, what? No.
It does say, I missed this part, but it uses a fingerprint scanner to make sure it's got the right person, Beth. So you fingerprint scan while you're sitting and doing your business in order for it to know it's you.
I do understand that it's going to have the information to correctly identify my waste product as opposed to the waste product of someone else in my house. But then it goes encrypted to the cloud, unencrypted. I just nah. There are ways to get stool samples.
Maybe I'm, I know. And I mean, look, I do see the value of it. It's not that I don't see the value of it. I just wonder the adoption of this. It's not that I don't think it's valuable.
Let's just say this is not likely.
Hey, Beth, we wanted to let you know that there's a little bit of a problem, and we've been observing the problem as well. Like, what is the messaging of this? Like, hey, we made an appointment for the doctor for you. Your colonoscopy is next week. Like, Andy.
Well, I just want to say that I don't think it's going to be a big hit product wise with the younger crowd. It's going to be something that may be useful in the context of, aging at home, where you might have an elderly parent who, you want to keep track of. And this is another sensor in the environment that's actually quite interesting when you think about the early warning health implications here, or for caretakers. So anyway, I think that's probably where it'll have its best utility.
Look, I like the idea. It's the adoption side that I think I'll be curious, but maybe you're right. Maybe it'll be a more health type situation. I don't know. Anyway, Karl, I feel like we left you out. Did you have one quick news story? We did talk about quite a few, but did you have any one so I don't leave you out of the news here? Otherwise, we'll move on.
No, not really. I think you got it all. Like, there was Claude Code. That was the only one that was like really newsworthy to me. I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead and hit it real quick.
To that. Yeah, it was just that Claude Code is now on mobile, so you can connect your GitHub to it, and then I think like people were like, "Oh, you can connect your terminal," but it's not, right? So, yeah, that's pretty much that was it. I think what was pretty awesome about this.
Question about that, Karl. I have a question about that. So you're focusing on the mobile implementation, but it's also available now through the browser. So you do not have to use terminal in order to implement, coding actions in Claude Code. But I thought that the real advantage of terminal was in terminal it has view to my entire file system on the computer.
Yes.
And if I use Claude Code in the browser, that doesn't happen, right?
Correct. I think the use case that they all had was if you're working on a project and you're going to bed and you don't want you're not having your computer with you, you can run additional either refactoring or whatever else you want to do via your phone, just have it run. Or you're somewhere else and you're not. I think it's more of like it's connected to all these different places, so you can go from one task to another, to a device to a device to a device without having to be on cursor or in your terminal, right? So it's like, but the benefit of being it in your terminal isn't unless, so one of the things I did was there's a project I'm working on that is connected to my terminal, but I'm doing a test on it and then giving it to a client so they can use it on their terminal, which is it's a kind of weird thing that it was a pure test. But then I'm like, wait a minute, how am I going to save any edits? And then it's like, oh yeah, if we're all connected to the same GitHub, then no problems. I'll just push the changes and then they can get the changes in a very more complicated manner. But other than that, yeah, the terminal is really where you get it, because like I really enjoy having sub agents work technically on my local devices, which has actually a lot of good use cases, and then add the skills function to it. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep saying I need to dive deeper into that. At this point, Karl, I just need to go like shadow you, I think, for a while on Claude and get caught up on code. And I think we may talk a little bit later about.
Why don't we do a show? We should talk about this after. Why don't we just do a show? I'll show you like the test, which is not like that big a deal. Of course. You can just run it. Yeah. And then talk.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Let's do that tomorrow.
Not Thursday. Tomorrow is fine.
Do it tomorrow.
Why? Oh, because you're out, Beth? Is that
we can totally do
it. That's like tomorrow, not Thursday. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, listen, we'll leave the news there, and we're going to pivot here a little bit. Just have a quick conversation. We got two other conversations we want to have. One of them is a topic I brought to the group, and it's about, I'm going to bring it up on screen here for a little starter point, but it's about, is human data enough? And this actually is a great sort of jump off point from yesterday's conversation, which is why I liked it for today. And basically, although this video itself is 6 months old, there's been more recent conversations about it. But I wanted to key up this video. On the screen, you're seeing David Silver, and he's a VP reinforcement learning, and I believe he's still at Google DeepMind. The VP David Silver, I believe so. He had a lot to do, and we'll get into it in a second about AlphaGo and AlphaZero and Move 37 and things like that. So we'll discuss that in a second. But let's just have him sort of key up this sort of starter argument, and then we'll dive into the conversation more. Maybe. Oh, come on. We're loading, buffering. Yes, thank you for the right word there. All right, let me see if I can reload here. We'll try really quick. See if we get any luck.
No.
Well, look, it was great. You guys are missing out. All right, I will do my best. Basically, what he said. Oh, let me take off hide screen here. Stop sharing. Okay. It's still like really trying over. I'm just going to shut down because you know it's going to come on. Here was the deal. They went back and talked about AlphaGo and AlphaZero. AlphaGo is now 2016, so we're almost at the 10-year mark. If you don't remember that story, really quick, AlphaGo was a big story where the game Go, which has been, I guess, widely considered to be the hardest game to play. It has, like, I guess, almost a bazillion moves that you can make. I've never played it. I can't speak to that. But anyway, this game Go, and it beat like the world champion at that time. Model basically beat the world champion. This is obviously 2016. We're long before all you need is attention and, you know, sort of landmark papers and stuff like that. What he talked about, because there's also AlphaZero, and I wasn't as aware of AlphaZero, but basically AlphaGo had human reinforcement learning. They started with a set of here's how you play the game. And then from that initial set of human data and reinforcement learning, it went on to beat, like I said, this grand champion. However, what he talks about and what he feels like the future here, and he's certainly not the only one, is talking about when human data really isn't the right next move here. And so with AlphaZero, it actually had zero, meaning zero training data. It knew nothing about the game. It literally did trial and error to build up its knowledge base, literally through millions of games and iterations to say, ooh, when I make that move, there's something that good happens. And when I make this move, something bad happens. But it had zero information from humans on it. He goes on to say in that video that not only did it reach the same level of intelligence, being able to beat like a grandmaster faster, it went beyond that. And so they talk about this Move 37. It's actually cool. Go look into that if you want. Move 37 was actually from AlphaGo. And that was a move that was so out of the box thinking, for lack of a better term, that it was like a 1 in 10,000 chance that they calculated that a human would ever come up to it. Now, again, I don't know the game, but I guess you kind of stay in these rows between 2 and 4. And AlphaGo decided to jump to row 5. And that's just not what happens. And his point was, how would it have gotten there had we put constraints on it on how humans think? And so obviously you saw he's the VP of reinforcement learning, right? So he clearly is in this role and has done this and was a big part of that initial stuff 10 years past. What I think is important, what he talks about and what we heard Andrew Karpathy talk about yesterday as well, is this is probably not the path forward. So is he saying, look, it should be all synthetic? No, he's saying, look, there's going to be different areas and domains where it's still going to be important to have human feedback in there. There's a lot of areas like that, but he uses this analogy of a cake. He said, what I don't like is if a model comes up with a cake recipe, a human might come in and say, that's a bad cake recipe. He said, but shouldn't the cake be created and consumed in order to figure out whether it was actually tasty or not? His point being, in that sort of high level analogy, how would we really know that the model hadn't come up with some new novel combination of ingredients that on paper look disgusting, but somehow work and make this cake actually done? Now, can the model actually taste the cake? No, right? He was just using it as an example. But I think it just brings up this bigger conversation. I'll put it out to you guys about how far should we want to go with human knowledge? Because as he's pointing out, and what he's saying essentially is, it will only ever go. We're basically handcuffing these models because it can only ever go as far as we can imagine it to go if it's based off of human training. And that aren't what we're really asking for in the AlphaZero example, for these language models, this AI to go far beyond our abilities, our inabilities as humans. And it's a bit of a check your ego at the door to say, we're not the best at doing these particular tasks. And what we really want is an AI that thinks outside the box, does Move 37, and finds net new ways. And he said the analogous would be MIT coming up with a new antibiotic that nobody previously human had figured out a combination for, yet this AI model was able to do it. He's like, that's the out of box thinking that we should be striving for. And his point was, he didn't feel like human learning or reinforcement were going to get us there. Thoughts?
I did want to mention that I want to go back to the roadmap, right? So you got level 1 is the chatbots, level 2 is the reasoners, level 3 is the agents. And I think what you're talking about, and I think there's smatterings of this all over the place. Like, for example, Claude announced their life sciences division yesterday too, right? I think there's bits and pieces you're moving to the inventor, it's not just recognizing patterns, or it's using the patterns or the data and the inference, the post-training that it's getting, and inventing itself, like inventing something that is new, right? And I think that's where, like, Sam Altman was saying, that's the exciting part. Everyone's looking there. I think Greg Brockman was talking about that. Two of the researchers, I saw them having a conversation that is a big focus. Who is OpenAI's, I think Mark Chen, him and some other person at OpenAI, like the head people, they're looking at that where it's the AI is looking to invent, hence the finding the cure for whatever it is, but like, or finding new things that enable people to do things. Even Andrei Karpathy was in his 2 hours with is it Dwarkesh podcast, that's what he was talking about too. So I'm thinking we're getting to that fourth piece. These are the beginnings of having AI that can invent or aid in the invention of new things.
Well, we've been doing that. They've been doing that for a while, right? Like that's the technology or the reasoning behind the protein folding. Is that AlphaFold, right?
AlphaFold,
so you have a set of ingredients, in this context, genes maybe, but you have a set of ingredients, and because of the way that AI can do things rapidly and calculate, you just now create all the possible combinations, and then you see what those kinds of things, but what kind of strengths come from that. Like, are there paths to go down? And I feel like you introduced it, Brian, with creating new antibiotics. I feel like we're doing that too, right? Like, we have new cancer drugs. We have this feels like something that is already happening. So maybe it's just being talked about in a different way, so it's hitting people differently. Is this we're way in the bubbles? So this seems not surprising to me.
Like, how deep in trouble are we?
I'm below the bubble surface for sure.
What do you think, Andy?
Well, I think, like Beth, I believe that this is all on track with my understanding of what the progression is, and how we're approximating a point in time where artificial general intelligence basically can imitate or replicate the same kind of creative, discovery-oriented initiatives that humans have demonstrated over time. We ran into a wall with data and scaling LLMs when, we've already hoovered up everything off the web, and there's not much of interest at the margin that's being generated here that's profoundly different from what they have already got. So what are we going to add now? Oh, okay, synthetic data. We'll have the AIs generate their own data to use as training for other models. But that synthetic generation was probably not that creative. It was just taking, the models or patterns that it observed in the training data that it had, and then expressing new instances of that kind of data. But eventually we get to the point where using this kind of brute force effort at looking at all the full range of possibilities, and then, evaluating each one and coming up with one that maybe humans didn't consider before. But the real step is related to reasoning, which is an analogic reasoning, meaning, okay, here I take this skill that I've developed in, let's take, for example, the unique skill set that I don't own, but Beth does, in improvisational comedy. Okay, so there's something there that pushes creative expression to its boundaries by having a set of kind of rules, but rules that can be broken sometimes, as long as certain of them are observed. That gives you a new path down a way. Well, so imagine taking knowledge, an AI taking knowledge that is gained from its training and its reasoning in one domain. Let's say it's in protein folding, and then it's looking at traffic management, and it says, oh, I've done this over here before, and I'm going to apply that to this other domain. That's a creative combination that humans demonstrate. AI is perfectly capable of, in my opinion. And it just has to have the objective functions to be able to determine whether the outcome of these experiments or explorations are really good or not.
Right.
And there we get to the question of how good is reinforcement learning? How can I do that? And then this jumps to, now what we really need is a world model in order to create a simulation to test what the outcome of that is. So there's another whole branch of the AI that's not about the creative exploration, but rather now the testing and validation of it. And it's going to depend on comprehension of physics and the realities of action, reaction that happen in the real world, and the constraints that we live with, living in a gravity bubble, right, that's formed around a molten core of lava. And that's the context in which it can do this kind of experiment, validate, or dispute, and then revise hypothesis and move on. And that's the scientific method. So we're not very far from the answer to the question, which is human data, or is data enough? No, it's not. It requires this very human experience, which is the scientific method, in order to advance the envelope, like to expand the envelope beyond what we have discovered through our own very short-term scientists, right? We have on the order of, 60 productive years possible. In many cases, the best results from scientists are happening in a much narrower band of their living ages, right? Maybe from the time that they're 25 to the time that they're 40. That's when they're really productive,
right?
In the context of this kind of creative advancement of what knowledge and wisdom is in the world. So now AI will take over and remove that obstruction, which is the degenerative aging that we all suffer, and the shrinking of our brains. Their brains aren't going to shrink.
Right. No bias. I mean, they can be biased, but I don't mean to say there's no bias in LLMs, but one of the ways to fight back against bias is not to put it in there in the reinforcement learning in the first place. If you have to guess, if the model doesn't have it to begin with, would it come up with its own bias if it's literally going through iterations to try to figure whether it's a digital twin or a virtual environment or something like that? And I just want to point out here before we leave this topic is it's not that we don't do this as humans. I've mentioned this before on the show. It's been a year or two now since I taught for them, but the company Synthesis, which came out of SpaceX, it was a private, like, internal school for the children of the people who worked at SpaceX, came out, was more public, called Synthesis. I taught for them for a while. And although it was done through games, that is exactly how I, as a facilitator, and we were careful not to call ourselves teachers, because what I would literally do is get on a screen like this with you guys, except I'd have 7 or 8 more kids, right? Students from 7 years old up to about 15 years old. And of course the games changed. And when we started a net new game together, I've mentioned this before, there were 0 instructions given. And it was like almost think of it being like a Space Invaders type game, pretty low graphics on the screen. 3, 2, 1, go. Nothing. I would give them nothing. And you could hear the frustrations, and you could hear the, why doesn't this work? Why doesn't my ship move? How come I can't get it to fire? Then what would start happening is, oh, I just found out if you hold down the Alt key, purely through hitting every key on the thing, and that was shared with another kid, maybe, unless they were on the other team, and they might withhold that information. So there was competition in there. But over the course of several weeks, actually, you would watch these children own their discovery. And that was the big key differentiator. I did not come in, or I tried not to. I tried to persuade them and push them in certain areas to help them discover. But the last thing I wanted to do, the last thing Synthesis wanted me to do, was give out the answer. Despite the frustration, and it's kind of hard because you're watching kids kind of be anxious and agony and feeling bad about themselves and feeling down, and you don't necessarily, you encourage them, but you don't jump in and fix it. And so we've seen this, right? And so I think there's a lot to be said for language models that can follow this same sort of route, which is to say, the models aren't going to care that it has to go through 1,000 iterations in order to figure out one move that's verifiable, that it can then use to do the next thing and the next thing. So, I'm hopeful that this, I agree with a lot of what the experts are saying here. And I'm hopeful that we can sort of get to a place where we can move past the human reinforcement learning as our, maybe one of our primary methods, because it probably is not the intelligence we want to lean on going forward. And we need to have new, more innovative ways of doing it. So I think what you guys have all said kind of rings true for me. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Because bias is an important thing. We talk about it. When we talk about bias, we're generally only talking about the bias that is not desirable. But in the same way, when we say that something is a hallucination, when it's the result that we don't want, when there's inaccuracy, and we don't talk about it as a hallucination when it generates what we want, even though it's the exact same process, it's just how we assess it on the back end. Without bias, there's no judgment about what's getting created. And that is a problem, because all combinations are not positive, and some of them are going to be very, very bad from the front end, right? Like just go in a room and make all the combinations you want. Tell me what you think. I think needs more. I think having just things put in combination is that, like, well, we don't need human reinforcement because we don't even understand what's happening. That is not like we're moving into great innovation for me. That's like, let's have a longer conversation about it. And I would love to hear more from the people who have that ability to put the thing in the room and say, go about these other pieces of it.
I do want to point out, just so I'm clear, if you go watch that video that didn't load, I've already forgot his name, but the gentleman, the VP there, he did say later, I just want to point this out. They gave the example of tracking markers to help with your blood pressure without bias. And I think, to your point, without bias, the goal is 0. Well, 0 is dead. We don't want blood pressure 0 over 0. That can't be, that's a paperclip problem, right? Like we haven't introduced the right bias, I think is the way you would say it, to ensure that there's still human guardrails there that say, like, well, this is it needs to be trained to be best for humans, not just the end result goal. And that could be considered, I think, bias, right? If I'm understanding you correctly. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, we are kind of at 50 minutes here. We don't have a ton of time to maybe jump into it, but if you guys will, if you don't mind me, pivoting here, I want to show something really quick on my screen that I was doing as far as like building skills inside a custom GPT so that I can just throw it back over to you guys. Because Beth, you're here today, Karl, Andy, you guys have all done, I think, more research on the Claude skills. So I just want to talk about it from a custom GPT standpoint and how you might mimic this type of action, but then have you guys talk about why that's obviously not a one-for-one comparison, but it's something that I think people can play with. So I just want to bring this up on the screen really quick and just show you a quick example that I built last night. And then we can talk, you guys can talk more about the Claude skills. And I think people are still generally, if I look at Reddit, if I look at comments, I think people are still very confused by this and they're trying to like wrap their heads around like, where does this make a difference? So let me start with something that we would be more familiar with, like a custom GPT. And then let's talk about how things are different in terms of maybe a Claude code. So in this particular case, you can see up here, I made a sales manager AI coworker. And my goal here was to essentially create the AI coworker to a typical sales manager. In this case, I trained the GPT, the coworker here, the AI coworker, up on a company called Dialpad. That's a company I've worked for. It's been a client of mine. They're okay with me using their name. And so on the backside of this, you need to know that there is knowledge, deep knowledge about what Dialpad does. There is also on the backside of this 10 unique skills that an AI or a sales manager would have as part of their job. And essentially this GPT is built on the skills and the knowledge of Dialpad. And what that enables you to do if you run it this way and you build it with that. And I also use my master and router prompt method where essentially just like a lighter, gentler version of an MCP, what the router does is it says, hey, you decide when one of these skills should be brought into the conversation. And we can actually see that here. If we go and see, like, there's a short little transcript as an example. It's like, create a coaching card for Jordan, then give me a QA scorecard using standard metrics, and finally produce me some CRM notes and a follow-up email to Lisa. And you can see here right off the bat, it comes in and it decides what skills need to be used for these particular tasks. And then it goes about doing it. And so we can see CRM notes, follow up here or whatever. Here's a different one. Here's my current opportunity list. Let's run a pipeline review of it. And you can see it's kind of like an ugly table, but it would be basically a table, right? And then we want to know a couple different things about, we want a 30-day coaching plan. It goes again, finds the skill and is able to go out and decide how to get this job done. So you can imagine as a sales manager, this could be a really helpful tool. This is actually something that could sit beside them as a coworker and be able to do some of the skills that they've defined on the back end, and then have a custom GPT essentially go and be able to do that. So a couple more examples here, and then I'll turn this off and leave it to you guys. So a little bit different here. It's not necessarily data, but a prospect said, we already use Zoom for our contact center and it's cheaper. Give me an objection handling card and then generate a one pager that my team can use to position Dialpad AI contact center against Zoom. So now what it's doing is not only pulling a skill, it's also going deep into that knowledge of Dialpad in order to come back with the right information. And to me, this is a great way that I think anybody right now could build their own sort of set of skills. If you like the idea of Claude skills and what it is projecting in and how it can help you, different use cases. Claude skills can go across many different platforms and things like that. And Andy has some stuff on MCP. But what I want people to get away from this is you are not limited to that. I've been building in this area and these types of prompts for a long time. And so if you have an idea of a set of knowledge plus a set of skills, and you want to combine them somehow to have some output for you, but you want it to be flexible enough where the whole point with Claude skills is not everything is loaded into memory. This is a viable way to do it. You could do it in Claude. You could do it as a project. You could do it as a custom GPT, a gem, a Copilot. It wouldn't matter. The same prompting on the back end of this would be almost universal across any. In fact, it would be for a gem or a Copilot. I guarantee you I could copy and paste this master prompt plus 10 documents or 11 documents, and it would all work in the other system. So I just want to throw that out there as an example, because I don't want people to get so caught up and be like, wow, I'd really love to do that skill. So you can. And in fact, Nate Jones on his video said so. You can take the same markdown files and go move them somewhere else. Now, with that said, you guys tell me why this is not Claude skills and why Claude skills takes this to perhaps another level, and how you guys see it, I guess.
I think you touched on the key distinction, which is that a skill in the Claude architectural environment isn't automatically loaded into context. Whereas in your custom GPT, everything that you have in instructions and skills as you described them, each of these sort of subroutines that you wanted to understand and know that could be applicable in its responses, all of those have to be loaded into context. And what that means is that every single turn of the conversation means that all of that information is coming in. So what Anthropic did is they said,
that's not true.
What's
that would mean that everything was being pulled into memory. It's not. It's a RAG system on the back. Only the knowledge and only the master and the router are pulled into context.
As soon as you're right that it'll be selective in the first turn, but everything is okay. I stand corrected. You're right.
Well, one question. I have one question because I'm not sure about this. I think this I talked about this like 4 or 5 months ago. In a custom GPT, is everything loaded during a conversation? So, is it, or is it only you have a custom instruction
RAG system?
But I'm honestly not sure.
No, and you don't have control over whether it is loaded or not, as those of us who built routers experience, right? It works a bunch of the time. It's actually really good. But there are times where all of us are like, the knowledge document is sitting in the project. Why did you not go and look at it when I said review all your knowledge in the project, right? That's a flaw in this, the way that the Claude skills are built. It's better. Now, I don't know if it's going to turn out to at some point also not load all of its knowledge, but the way that it's designed is designed to load more of those skills when it looks like you're going to need that. You want that.
I will go find out the answer. I think you're wrong. I think you guys are wrong. I think it's a RAG system. Just a custom GPU. You went over and talked about projects. Projects are different. And that's like you're loading system knowledge, just like Google AI Studio just came out to you. That's a different case altogether. I'm saying specifically for a custom GPT or a gem or a Copilot that all have the same building structure, right? I am loading in stuff that goes in the RAG. It's vectorized. We know that it's vectorized. That is not the same thing. I just want to make sure that's clear. That is not the same thing as saying that when I start talking to this custom GPT, it pulls all of that into memory. Why? Why would it have to kill all those tokens? And we can test this by looking at the token count on it. It is not pulling all that into memory. It is going and looking for it when there's certain keywords, wake words. And by the way, I will say an MCP, Claude skills, are going to be better at distinguishing when the right skills should be brought into the conversation. However, you can prompt your way into making sure that the right wake words, the right keywords, and the right verbiage, when that's brought up by the AI sales manager in this particular use case, pulls that document. It literally goes and looks at the router from the master, looks at the router and says, I'm supposed to be looking at document number 6. Then it pulls it in, and now it looks at those instructions and pulls it in. So I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. If I'm wrong, I will be happy to say I'm wrong. I do not think it pulls it all into memory because that would be a massive waste of tokens.
Nope, you're not wrong about that. The Claude skills do not rely on you knowing all of the things that exist in the process, right? Like you built it, Brian, so you know what should happen. Claude skills Claude skills can be called without knowing how to call it based on the conversation that you're having with Claude, and they can load multiples that all function at the same time. That's why I say it's better than a custom GPT.
That part's different. Yeah, I don't think we could. I mean, it's gonna pull in certain skills. Could it mix and match 2 different skills at once and come up with a net like version 3 that's a mix of 1 and 2? I don't know that Claude could do that either, but you're right. That would be a higher level thinking and reasoning than anything I've seen inside of a custom GPT. I mean, the custom GPTs are fairly basic, right? I mean, they do really amazing things. And I use them all the time, but they're limited in their scope of what they can go do. And so they're not going to call a tool. They're not going to go whatever. And Andy, I think you were sort of, right before we went live on the show, you said you had done some deep research and I was agreeing with you. So maybe bring that back up about like, the MCP side of it, or the idea of the concept of MCP and how that might work with skills plus tools. Because I think that itself is that's really, really cool to me.
Yeah. So let me just correct you on the deep research part. It was more shallow reading than it was deep research. So I don't have a deep understanding of skills, and I'm still trying to understand the distinctions that it creates. But what's forming in my mind is the idea that, like MCP created a standardized protocol for the definition of services that are addressable by an AI agent, skills also package up a deterministic process that is callable. It's a function that's callable by an AI agent. So that's a little different from the way I think of a custom GPT having a document that's retrievable that describes something, right? It's more like, here's the cookbook, here's the playbook in Claude Skills for this fairly narrowly defined process. Let's take a really narrow context, like in your example that you were giving us, where you have a sales process that's being advanced. The final output might be that you want to deliver it in a certain format, with a certain structure and with instructions associated with it to deliver to a client. Well, a Claude skill could do that and define that process. And then at the very end of its entire process, it would call that skill and bring it in and do that. Similarly, you could create an example document in your custom GPT that shows the output format, but then the AI has to say, okay, here's my example, and I'm going to reform my thing into this structure. There's something a little more compact, portable, and reproducible about a Claude skill. That's also a package in a standardized form, like an MCP is a package in a standardized form, that can be called in the open agentic web, let's say. So that's a little different than a custom GPT.
For sure.
But
Yeah. You're not inside the wall guarded, first and foremost. Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, I mean, we're seeing OpenAI get better and better at, what skills and tools they connect. So I'm not saying that won't always be the case, but yeah, of course, you're absolutely right.
OpenAI will have something quite comparable to that, but
yeah,
Anthropic seems to be, at least with the example of MCP and now with skills, they seem to be at the forefront of moving beyond the walled garden to the architecture of the open agentic web, and providing the toolkits for that. And that's how I think Claude skills are distinct. I haven't ever built one yet. I'm trying to find the time to do it, but I'm learning. But I'm very familiar with custom GPTs, and I've built many of those.
So what it says to me is the difference in like goals for the organizations, for Anthropic, the vision that Anthropic has moving forward, and the vision that ChatGPT has moving forward. ChatGPT and OpenAI's vision seems very much to be, don't worry about prompting. You can just do whatever. You don't need to know all of the good things, and we'll give you a pretty good answer, right? That was the big thing when GPT-5 came out. You don't have to know anything. You can just like ask bad questions, and GPT-5 is within its decision process, its auto decision process will decide which model is going to answer you. Anthropic seems very clear, and has been from the beginning. There are ways to get better value out of our product, and we're going to give you them.
Yeah, I agree.
They're not trying to like be. You don't have to have any skill in talking to us. We'll give you great results. While that is also like, it's comparable to GPT-5, I think, but they're much more like, there are ways to get better results. We're going to give you all the tools that you need to get better results. Please use them.
I 100% agree on that. And I mean, again, I've said this many times on the show, but credit to Rachel Woods, who like 2 years ago said, I think Claude is really going to strategically move, Anthropic's going to move towards like enterprise type solutions. And man, has she been right over and over again. That whatever her inclinations were, whatever made her think that way, I found her to be correct over and over again. Because I agree with you, Beth, like the way they're building systems. I mean, they're the same, but I would not call Claude or Anthropic at this point, at least in late 2025, a direct replacement for ChatGPT. They definitely have their own lanes, and they came up with MCP. I mean, Google came up with A to A. We've seen other people adopt MCP. We're going to see other people adopt A to A. So they are sort of sharing the same frameworks that sort of rise to the top. But anyway, I agree with you guys. And my point, by the way, was not to say like this is the same thing as Claude skills, because number one, I haven't built a Claude skill, so I can't compare it side to side. What it was more about saying was almost like what Nate Jones was saying. You're not beholden to that. You don't have to stop there. What you can do literally today, if anybody's listening to this and they don't know where to start with this, what I would say is start working with your language model of choice, ChatGPT 5, Claude, whatever, and start thinking about what skills you would like your future AI coworker to take over for you. Then start working back and forth to define what really goes into that skill. What's the deep knowledge? What do you know that it needs to know in order to do a great job? Then create the document that skill. Now, the nice part about that is you can now use that markdown skill anywhere inside a Claude skill. You can use it inside of a custom GPT. You're not limited now by creating that document. So for anybody who wants to know, like, well, I don't know, where do I go next with this? I would say start thinking about those skills. Keep breaking down the job tasks into smaller and smaller skills, because what I feel like Claude is indicating here is, hey, if you were to have 100 skills, we have a good way to go figure out which skill to use, or perhaps a multitude of skills, and we will figure out how they should be combined together. What you need to do is figure out what the skill is. But the thing is, you don't have to start from a blank piece of paper. You can use any of these models to help you write the skills. You could create a custom GPT or a Claude project that literally writes skills for you. And that's a great way to go about it too.
Let me use a use case example to capture what I think you're saying, which is in enterprise, you have people who sit in a certain functional role and they develop corporate knowledge over a long period of time working in that company. And we want to capture that knowledge and the skills so that that person's accumulative, capabilities are accessible. And we want to use AI to assist in making that more permanent and available to everybody in the company. Against the possibility of vacations, right? Oh, Joe's on vacation, but I really want to understand what he knew. So you could do this that you described by having Joe over time just capture in these documents what it is that he does. He could dictate, you could do that and just dump it into a custom GPT, or dump it in as context documentation into a Claude skill, and then define that skill. Okay, if you run into this problem in this company, this is the skill set that I apply to kind of troubleshoot it and then resolve it. And here are the people I have to communicate to. And I'm basically defining an SOP, in effect, a workflow process in a package that now is this skill, which is from that person. So the use case that I want to use as the model for this, it could be solved by either custom GPTs or GEMs or Claude skills, is capturing the unique, human accumulated knowledge in a function within a company and packaging that up in a way that it's accessible even after that person departs.
Yep. 100% agree. And for anybody who thinks that this is about, well, if I put down all my skills, aren't I dispensable? And couldn't a company just put thank you for doing that big project, that QBR, OKR that we all had. Thank you. You're now dismissed, right? And I think that's a natural fear for anybody, which is like, why would I put down my tribal knowledge or whatever? But the reality is, I think what you're going to find, especially if I was a sales manager using this particular one at this dial pad example, it still requires a wealth of human knowledge to use it really, really well. Yes, it can do skills, but it's not a substitution and should not be a substitution for human intelligence in certain niche skill sets, right? So if you're good at what you do, you're not hampering yourself. You're actually helping yourself by creating these skills. It's still going to require you plus AI. That's the best of what we see out there anyway, is when we have people who have skill sets and they're at niche, but they've figured out a way to help AI make them more efficient, help them through working problems, but it would fall flat on its face if you gave it to somebody outside of that discipline. And so I just, I wanted to end on that and say, I understand that people would have concerns about this, but I don't see this as a replacement for people. I just see this as a different way of starting to work alongside AI. And whether it's Claude skills or you're just doing it more simply inside a custom GPT, any of that should be net positive if you build them right. Okay, well, we'll leave it there because, we went not over, but, the conversation went a little bit longer on this one. So we'll wrap it up there. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with us today. Thanks for everybody who hung out in the comments a little bit longer. Good conversations all around here. Thanks to Karl, who had to jump before we wrapped up. And we'll be back again tomorrow for another great show. So until then, have a wonderful day. Thanks for hanging out with us today.